Hi everyone, welcome to another video. I am Laurent Macar and today we are going to wrap up the books that I have read in the second part of November. I just checked, there were 10. But luckily for you, I'm not going to talk about all 10 of them extensively here, at least I'm not going to try not to. And that is because I've decided I'm going to try to not repeat myself so often and make videos in which I talk about the same book multiple times and then post the same video. Well, post those two videos 1 week from one another. So first of all, I have read two books for my Around the World project. One is I need to put it here. One is The Invitation Only Zone by Robert S Boynton, and the other is Shark Drunk or Shark Fever by Morten A. Stroksnes. And I'm not going to talk about these two extensively because you might want to check my Around the World update video that I will post somewhere over there. Both are non-fiction. This one is set in North Korea and Japan, and it is about the abduction of Japanese in the 70s and the 80s, and they were abducted by the North Koreans. And in this book you hear why we think that was, how they were abducted, what their lives were, etc. And the writing wasn't great. And as for this one, also non-fiction, and this is about two friends, the writer Morten and his friend Hugo, who decide they want to fish a Greenland shark, which is a big nasty beast. And they do that in the north of Norway. And in this book you don't only hear about that, but also you get a lot of information about fishing and about nasty or super interesting deep sea creatures or life in the north of Norway in general. There are three other books I'm not going to talk about that much either, so let's do those now. I have been rereading the Narnia series, so I started with The Nephew's Magician, which I have read in French, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe in English, and The Horse and His Boy, all by C.S. Lewis. And I have been reading this series with Pauline from Dancing Lawn. And because we are rereading the whole series, I thought I would vlog that. So I'm not going to tell you about these books right now. The vlog will not be spoiler free, I should say that. But for now, let's just say it's been a delight to reread them and to see all of the parallels that there are with the Bible. And it's just been wonderful. It's been a very Christmassy holiday feel. So I've been loving rereading them and sharing that with Pauline. So now we have arrived at the 5 books I am going to talk about today. And just I want to say, I'm pretty proud that I managed to talk about 5 books without saying too much in about 2 minutes. Yay me. Okay, November is traditionally on BookTube or in the book reading community. It has been for a couple of years, the non-fiction November month. And the idea is that you read more non-fiction than you usually would. So if you don't read any non-fiction, just reading one already counts as yay! And I do kind of sometimes read non-fiction, so I just looked at all of the books that I had marked as, oh, I want to read this, and my library has them, and just picked up a lot of non-fiction. And that is also how I got to read these two. And I also talked about some non-fiction in my previous video, my previous wrap-up. But there were 2 others. The first was Radium Girls by Kate Moore. This is about a period in time at the beginning of the century, of the 20th century I should say, where radium was not seen as the dangerous material we know it is now. Radium was a wonderful thing. It was used in chemotherapy to radiate out cancer cells, but it was also used by the very rich people to add in drinks or to add in food because there was the idea that this was a very healthy thing and it would make you better. And because it glows in the dark, it was also used on the dials of watches to make them glow in the dark. And during the First World War, the radium dial painting companies were booming because there was a lot of demand for these watches by the army. And the people that were painting these dials were young women, some as young as 14. And in order to paint these tiny dials, they would dip the paintbrush in the paint, lick it with their tongue in order to make it very small, and then they would paint it. And they would repeat that and repeat that and repeat that. And at the time, they were super happy. They were all shiny and fluorescent, and everything was good, and it was a well-paid job. But as it turns out, years later, all of these women started to have to a different degree, and in different places in their body, they would have a lot of things happening to them. And this book is about the discovery of the role of radium in that and the things that happen to these women. And as you can imagine, a lot of them also died painful deaths. And this is also about the fight with the radium companies in the courts. It was very interesting. I had never heard of this. You know, now we take a lot of these rules, these protection rules in factories, we kind of take them for granted, in a sense that so many women had to die for these laws to be passed, for radium to be seen as this dangerous thing. And I think it's very good to know that and to realize that. And this book, it goes in depth into the lives of these women. I think that's good because it enables you to have faces. It's not just, oh, people died and people suffered. No, you get to know these women a little bit more. But somehow the thing I struggled with a bit in this book is that although we get to know the women, I didn't feel, there were just too many of them that we stayed still. We didn't go to a very substantial level with them. So I didn't have the feeling I knew any of the women specifically. I just had a vague idea of them and they all kind of blended into one. So yeah, this is, it was a little bit dry at times because of, but still, it was very interesting and I'm glad I read this. The other non-fiction, completely different, I read with my book club, my physical book club here in the Netherlands, and it is The Year of Magical Fiction, and it is The Year of Magical Thinking by Jane Didion. Sorry for the shiny, I'm gonna try to remember to keep it this way. So this is a memoir, and it's a memoir by Jane Didion. Yes. No, she talks about a year in her life after the death of her husband. She and her husband had been married for years and years, happy relationship, always together. Both of them were writers. I didn't know Jane Didion before this, by the way. And he dies of a heart attack, and that is devastating to her, as you can imagine. And in this book, she talks about how it is devastating and what happened to her, the things that she still believed, or things that she did to try to keep going, but she's not trying to keep going. She's not. So she talks about the difference between grieving and mourning. And the death of her husband is not the only thing. Her daughter is also, at the time of the death of her husband, in the hospital. If not actually in a coma, then she is at least in a comatose state. And later on in the year, she has an accident and also has to go back to the hospital for a longer period of time. And they're not certain if she's going to live or not. So Jane Didion gets all these waves of tragic things happening to her. The writing is beautiful. It's like clear water, a stream with clear water. I really liked the writing, but somehow I didn't. Jane Didion has all these things that are happening. We've got the death of her husband, but I think because I'm still pretty young and I don't have the life experience, I haven't had an experience like this or something that comes close to it. Because of that, I think a lot of things that she was describing or that she was feeling kind of went past me. It's like, you know, when you don't know anything about art, for example, and you see a painting and you look at it and you enjoy it because it's beautiful. But if you know about the painter, if you know about the style it's in, if you know other art by that painter, if you know about the people that influence this painting, if you know about the theme, then you're going to enjoy it so much more. And I think that's the similar thing that happened to me with this book. I could see part of it, but other parts, they just weren't for me because I don't have that experience yet. So I do think this is something I'm going to keep on my shelf, and if at one point something like this happens to me, I think I will go back to it because I think it will give some kind of houvast. There's got to be an English word for that. I think it will give me something to grab onto. Yes, that's the word. But yeah, for now I was just a little bit too distant, and it also, Jane Didion lived a very privileged life, and that is not acknowledged at any point in this book, and I kind of missed that. The whole, oh, I'm struggling a bit, let's go to Honolulu to write a book. Yeah, but yeah, so that is Jane Didion, Year of Magical Thinking. I have been reading also another book as a buddy read, and this buddy read is with Laura from Laura Reads Pages, and that is Motorcycles and Sweetgrass by Drew Hayden Taylor. And we read this together because it is set in Canada, where she is from, and she is actually just arrived there also yesterday after having spent a month in South Korea. And I don't know, it was just the idea of reading a book that is set in a certain country and reading it with a person that is from that country, that alone, I have been loving it, so thank you, Laura, for that. We have not discussed yet the second part of the book. We only discussed the first part, and it was very good. We're liking it and liking also the discussion. So in this book, we get to know a couple of characters who are from the Anishinaabe community in Otter Lake in Canada. And it starts when the grandmother, Lillian, of a big family, passes away, and one of her pre-dying wishes is for an old acquaintance of her to come back, and she makes him promises to do a couple of things. And this person is a very strange character, and he has this very cool motorbike, and he comes into the community and kind of everybody is fascinated by him. And as part of the promises that he made to the grandmother Lillian, he gets into contact with one of her daughters, Maggie, who is the chief of the community, and her son. And things kind of follow from there. I can't really get into this book too much of the plot because the plot is very interesting. We kind of don't see things. The expectations that I had for the book are not really happening. But it's quite funny. There are raccoons that are going to take revenge. There's this very interesting discussion about how to respect your roots, but also try to go with modern times. They talk about what happened to one of the characters when he was a child in that terrible, terrible school. It talks about alcoholism, it talks about grief, and it talks about just your heritage. I really like this book. I recommend it. It's light, but it still deals with interesting topics. And as I said, I've been loving reading this with Laura. I have also I read it in one day, that wasn't necessarily good, but the French book Les jeux, sont faits by Jean-Paul Sartre. And in English, the title of this is The Chips Are Down. It's a play, and it's pretty short. And this is definitely a book that benefits from not knowing what it's about when you get into it. So I'm not going to tell you anything about the plot. It's easy to read. It's very interesting. It's about... What I'm going to say is it's about death. It's about fate. It's about love. It's about letting go. It's about treason. Yeah, it's a very good book. It's if you just have one rainy day and you don't really know what to do, I think this is interesting. It's very dark and it's very well done. That's all I'm going to say. The last book that I'm going to talk about today is The Stationery Shop of Tehran by Marjan Kamali. So this is historical fiction and it's a romance, but it's a light romance, so I could deal with it. So part of the story starts in 1953 in Tehran, and we have two young people, the narrator Roya, and she loves to read and she spends a lot of time in a stationery shop, and there she meets the mysterious boy who is going to change the world, Bahman, and they fall in love and they're going to get married, and something happens and they don't end up together, and in that part of the book the political struggles form a backdrop of their love, of the story, and of you getting to know the Iranian culture. And the second part of the book, we kind of get to know Roya's story when she leaves Iran. She goes to America to study, and we follow the whole of her life in the US, and that kind of ends up in current day where she meets Bahman again. It was a very entertaining book. It was not fantastic, it was not bad, it was just what it is. It was light, and it kind of still dealt with a lot of subjects. And there's definitely in this book a trigger warning for the death of a young child. So those were all of the books I wanted to talk about today. Let me just show you the whole stack. Ta-da! Well, it's not the whole stack. I'm missing two because audiobooks and stuff. Talk to me if you've read any of these books, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!